welcome everybody. Some people trickling in here. I'm sure there'll be many more in this session, but we have the amazing Tracy Eiler here, who's the CMO of Elation. She has some incredible content to run through. I was fortunate enough for Tracy to share some of the content with me before this. So I got a little sneak peek and it's pretty awesome. I'll leave it at that. So without further ado, I'll let Tracy take over as there's a lot to go through. Of course, if there's any questions, feel free to throw them in the Q&A and chat. And of course, I'll come back on with a few minutes left to make sure to moderate those questions. But without further ado, Tracy, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much, Pete, for joining. Can you see my screen? I have a collage up right now.
Not yet. I think you got to press the middle button, little arrow up there, and you should be able to share the screen.
Okay, sorry about that. Let me just get back over, figure out where I'm at so that I can actually do that correctly. It's always interesting to have a brand new platform. So I do the present to audience and I say share screen. Is that right?
I believe so. Yes, ma'am. If you have any trouble, I can actually pull up the deck as well if need be.
Yeah, why don't you do that? That would be helpful, and then I can just get warmed up and stuff. So thanks everybody for coming. And I'm coming at you from after 5 weeks ago moving cross country from California to Northern Virginia. So I still have boxes behind me that I'm trying to hide. So you'll have to excuse me for that. But this topic of alignment, which is this whole theme of this conference, is super near and dear to my heart. And, I basically have been living and working with sales leaders almost my whole entire life. And in fact, my very first job out of college was a sales development rep, and actually during college. And we all went by the same anonymous name, Chris Kelly, because it was a gender neutral name. But that is where I really kind of fell in love with figuring out how to get sales and marketing to work together. And I had the opportunity to really study this subject and actually write a book on the subject, which is on the screen there, along with pictures of my family and other stuff, so you can kind of get an idea what's important to me. The Tenbound folks are going to give away 10 copies of the book to anybody that has a good question in the chat. So please do that for us. Go ahead and give us a click, Pete. So let's talk about what we're here to discuss today. And, alignment is really an age-old problem. And it's something that, as the sessions that I have been attending today, we have, it's not getting that much better. Although I will say that there are many, really interesting focus areas that people are coming around. I just got out of a session around how to, how ops and SDRs can get better aligned. And so we're going to talk about some of the challenges and then recommendations on what to do. And all of this is outlined in the book. So this is kind of the stump speech. This is all based on original research that I first did for the book in 2016 when Wiley published it. It sold 20,000 copies, this book, since then, which is amazing. The research itself has been rerun a couple of more times. So been trying to keep it up to date, as things go forward. Go ahead and give us a click, Pete. Now, go ahead and keep going forward. And one more, please. So when you are aligned, you get much better business growth and win rates and quota. And this has been seen time and time again by Serious Decisions and others, including marketing profs. And who wouldn't want this? Give us a click. Everybody wants it, but why are we all struggling? It's hard. And let's talk about the challenges. Give us one more to click. Today we know that the buyer is in charge. And, the data that I have seen from Gartner and CEB is that the buyer is almost, 60% of the way through their journey before they even engage with us. They're staying anonymous for so long, which is why things like intent and other things are really key. Go ahead and build this slide out for me. Now, buyer groups are struggling the most, however, early on in their cycle. So that's really where marketing can make a huge difference with content. But then we've got to get that sales and marketing handoff going. We're going to talk about how to do that. Go ahead. Now, there's an impact on revenue when you are not aligned, as much as 10%. That's what IDC says. Now, just think about that. 10% more revenue if you were better aligned. There's also a big impact on people. And go forward 2 slides for me, Pete. As part of my research, we asked people, salespeople and marketing people, what did they think about each other? And, we put some crazy prompts in there that would, essentially ignite the inner stereotypes of all of us, like marketing has their head in the clouds, or salespeople don't listen, or are bullies. But my favorite one is the bottom one, which kind of scares me, honestly, that almost 30% of my sales colleagues think they could do a better job than me in marketing, but also that, 20% plus of the marketing people are thinking they can do a better job than sales. That's ridiculous, right? right? Like we both have deep art and science in our roles, and there's no way that we could switch roles easily or quickly. So, this is just kind of underscoring that attitudinal thing, which really underlies the trust issue that is fundamental to this problem. Go ahead and give us a click, Pete. Now let's talk about how to get aligned. And there's really 4 areas that we're going to cover. So please move forward. The first issue that the research found is that lack of accurate data was a huge issue in alignment. It was one of the top 4, which is not what I expected. So let's talk about what you need to do about that. A big piece of this issue is all around target marketing, which is how big's your TAM, what's your ICP, are you agreeing on what an ICP even really is? And our research is showing, and as well as some others, that marketers are just not spending enough time really assessing the target market in partnership with their sellers. So that's a big area. Click, please. A big piece of this is knowing how large your total addressable market is. And in order to do that, you have to have a good idea of what your ideal customer profile is. Now, our research is showing that marketing salespeople are just not doing this enough. They're not really getting a good idea. And there's tools out there like Inside View and Sixth Sense and others that can really help you figure out the size of your TAM, which is a really critical thing to do and refresh on a very periodic basis. Go ahead, please. This chart I love, and I would take a screenshot of it if I were you, and of course the slides will be available later. But I like this flow because, when I'm trying to talk to my board or someone else about, the path to account-based marketing, which so many of us are doing now after, several years of practice, the path to that really starts with the ideal customer, then the size of your TAM and what your white space is, and then ABM. And every time I show this chart, people are like, oh, I get it. That's the flow. Those are the dependencies. And, I would really recommend refreshing this process at least twice a year. And the first time that I was in a company that tried account-based marketing, we made the mistake of switching around target accounts about once a quarter and allowing our sales reps to say, hey, I don't want these 25, I want those 25. And that was just a mess. And so we basically locked it down twice a year. And of course, now we layer in intent so that we have a much more responsive process to what those accounts even are. But this is a great one for setting the tone. Go ahead and give us a click. It's a good thing you can do. Now let's talk about communication. That's the second highest ranked problem. And you kind of think it's super basic, right? Like we all work on our communication skills all the time. But let's start with the fundamentals, click please, as to why this might start. Now let's just start first with an attitude, which I really believe from my bones and the roots of my bones that marketing is there to make sales easier. But we're also not doormats, right? That's like the little caveat. A friend of mine, another CMO, likes to say, we serve sales, but we're not servants. And I think that partnership is so, so important. That's fine, Pete, go ahead. What are we afraid of when you think about how we approach our jobs and the mistrust that exists and the stereotypes that we have of each other? These are some of my favorite ones that actually came from verbatim feedback in the surveys that I've been doing. And, it's just classic again and again. And I'm sure many of you on this call have heard these comments either coming out of your own mouths or coming out of your colleagues' mouths. And what's that based on? It's really based on a trust problem. So I have a suggestion, click please, which is a trust test. Now, this started by Meg Hewer of Serious Decisions. She's now with a great agency called Winning by Design. And then I took it and adapted it more. Now, this one is aimed at marketing people to say, how do I know if my sales team trusts me or not? Now, to my face, they might say that they do, but behind my back, it might be a different story. So how can I really know? And this list is a good one. And I'm sure there's more that many of you have come up with to really figure out what's in the brain of your sellers. And if they're not giving you feedback or inviting you to their forecast calls or things of that nature, they really don't trust you. And you got to start there. Go ahead and give us a click. Back at the office, what do you do? And one of the things that I did in this book is, people don't have time to read something cover to cover. So at the end of every chapter is a what do you do back at the office? Now, of course, we're not in the office, but what do you do when you're back in your workday? This is kind of my favorite list. I think my top one on here would be transparency, which is really taking the time to explain to your sellers, if you're in marketing, why it is that you're making the decisions that you're making about campaign investment or other things. One of my favorite comments that I hear salespeople say all the time is, hey, we should do a billboard on, name the highway in Silicon Valley, it would be Highway 101, or we should do airport ads, or we should fill in the blank. And, of course, there's a million ideas that marketing can do. However, what's really behind all of that question, right? So I'll take that feedback, but then I'll also explain, hey, the reason why we wouldn't do the billboard on 101, folks, is because we're primarily selling to FinServ, and those companies are in New York and London. Why would we do something locally, right? I'll explain that level of detail, which is really important, especially for your CMO to take the time to do. And the converse is also true. If you're in sales, really being transparent about why you care about certain things, or why you might think that there's too much noise in the lead volume or something like that. Go ahead and give us a click, and let's talk about the next problem. Challenge number 3 out of 4 is that we're really measured by different metrics. Let's go ahead and give us a couple of clicks to go to the end of this to accelerate it. You got to focus on pipeline. And my research is showing that the majority of marketers now are actually measured by pipeline, and that's what they start on in terms of that integration point between sales and marketing. And they're actually comped on pipeline, that their bonus might be even 100% tied to pipeline, which I think is really, really critical. And I would advocate that all of you do if you're not doing that already. Now let's go to the 4th problem, which is really broken processes. And there's a lot to unpack here. Pete, I want you to jump ahead to the slide that looks like a sideways 8. Now, the traditional funnel looks like a funnel, right? That you would use to put oil in your car. And that's a great way of thinking about the funnel if all you're doing is new logo acquisition and you never grow and you never are looking at how you're going to expand, which is not true, right, you guys? Like, of course we want to expand our customer base. So I really like this model. And this is another picture that I always show. I'll draw it on a whiteboard constantly, really explaining that we need to be thinking about every step. And then my top recommendation is work with your sales team on deciding marketing's priority, new logo versus expansion, and really think about where you want to put your muscle and your time and energy. And my current company, Elation, we're 50-50 in terms of our time and energy. And we're really working on ways to build expansion into everything that we do. That's not only the renewal number, which is so critical for all of us that are in any kind of annuity or subscription business, but where can we hunt and find that expansion and balance those two things? And, it's all becoming very integrated together, which is something I find exciting, but it makes things even more complicated. Go ahead and give us a click. Now, this I think is really interesting. Let me unpack this chart for all of you. So this started with something that I saw Forrester do. And then in my own research, I asked marketing and salespeople, where are you spending your time? So that horizontal access, or kind of all of the things that a marketing department could do during the course of a customer lifecycle. And on the vertical axis is customer lifetime value over time. And, traditionally, marketing teams have been spending more than 80% of their time on that first category, net new logo acquisition. Increasingly, however, I'm seeing in the research that we're starting to spend more time on helping with adoption. So we think of that as like, oh, that's the CSM's jobs. Like my friend Julia Wilson, who works at People AI, I see she's here today. The customer adoption part, marketing can help with that. We can help with the messaging, we can help with sequencing, we can help with best practices content. Then there's that upsell, cross-sell, or expansion. And then that final one, be advocacy. And at least in my history, my early days as a marketer, it was all about new logo acquisition and then customer references. But all that in between part, we didn't spend any time on, which is really crazy when you think about it. You need to earn the right each step of the way, earn the right to cross-sell, upsell. If your customer has not done successful adoption, of course you're not going to earn the right to sell them more. And then of course you're not going to earn the right, to ask them to speak on your behalf. So I think this is really interesting. And I would ask yourself and your own teams, how much of your effort are you really spending on each piece of the journey? And then check that again and again, and map your spend to that and your people to that, and in your OKRs or MBOs or whatever, however you're organizing your work. Go ahead and give us one more click. So back at the office, there's lots of things that you can do. Just rewind real quick. This is just my suggested list of things that you can be doing as it relates to process. The handoff points in each part of that journey, whatever you call them, MQL, SQL, SAL, etc. Really having those definitions locked down and checking them on a regular basis. Like, I'm really learning again and again the unfortunate lesson that this is really like sales and marketing alignment is very much like a marriage or any kind of healthy relationship. You can't set it and forget it. And even in my existing company right now, we're finding the faster that we grow and we're adding salespeople at a very rapid clip, we have to keep going back and making sure that that acceptance criteria is really well understood, because we see a lot of variance right now. It's an existing problem that we have at Elation. We see a lot of variance across sales reps and what they'll accept and not, even though we have a written definition. So that kind of process, it's like dental flossing every day to keep yourselves out of the dentist. You got to do it, but man, it's one of the most important things you can possibly do. And then that marketing meeting comment, it's a cutesy term, but a former colleague of mine, Andrea Austin, coined it, which is really that alignment meeting between sales and marketing leadership, where you're walking through the pipeline, you're walking through acceptance criteria, you're getting feedback. And my biggest tip for you on that kind of cadence is, most of us do annual planning, and we also will do like a quarterly business review. But what about if you had a 6-week kind of rolling window of conversation where when you're in that marketing meeting, let's say every other week, you're looking 3 weeks back and 3 weeks in the future. It's very, very time bound, but you can get feedback on what just happened and kind of unpack the quality of whatever marketing was generated and see what sales has to say. And then you're giving your sales team a heads up about what's coming in the future. And I find that to be a very, very effective way to do things and, give your teams visibility into what's actually happening. Okay, so let's kind of wind ourselves into Q&A. Go ahead and click us forward to our conclusion. You can get there with alignment. You will see better revenue performance. There is no doubt. When I asked companies, are you meeting or exceeding your revenue goals? They had very, very good alignment scores. And in the appendix of this slide, everybody, that you'll get the full deck. Make sure you look at everything that's hidden, because sometimes I do this talk in an hour, and there's some really juicy charts and other things where you can kind of figure out where you are in alignment maturity. There's kind of like a little scorecard you can try. One more click, please, Pete. So, what do you do back at the office in an overall level? We've talked about, I think, probably everything on this list. The measuring trust, I really can't underscore enough. It's very important to me. Like, I watch attitude like a hawk and really get ahead of it in alignment with my CRO. It really starts at the top. I don't know about any of you, but I have worked for CEOs that wanted me to fight with my VP of sales. I literally had a CEO, 2 different ones actually, tell me, hey, I want there to be healthy tension in your relationship, as if there was going to be some Darwinian survival of the fittest outcome, when in fact we all know that when we're fighting with our colleagues, we don't do our best work. We're very inhibited, and eventually we end up wanting to leave the company, frankly, and you end up in this super combative situation. So that trust piece is really, really key, and having it start from the top. And I would encourage, I have friends of mine who say, my CEO wants me to fight with my colleague, and I'll tell them, go find another job. Like, if you can't convince your CEO that they need to, really make sure that alignment is an imperative and stop all the conflict, you shouldn't be working there. Just, there's plenty of other good jobs. Give us one more click, please. So, you will have faster growth and higher profit. Now, just think about this. This is a Serious Decisions data also. They're now part of Forrester, as many of you guys know. What wouldn't you do for even 5 points more growth or a little bit more profit, even if you're not a public company? You really want to have those efficiency metrics. And so it's very possible to make, to do much better in all of your measures. So in conclusion, give me one more click, please. Please stay in touch with me. I'd love to roll into Q&A, and I think, Pete, I'm doing reasonably well with trying to leave 5 minutes for Q&A at the end here. Please do stay in touch.
You absolutely are. Tracy, that was a quick rundown.
High speed.
So much high speed, quick rundown, but a ton of amazing stuff in there. So as Tracy mentioned, we will get the deck out. I actually already made a copy of it because I was looking through it and geeking out through it. So thank you, Tracy, personally from me. We do have a couple questions here. Let's start at the bottom. So why is the flow for account-based marketing? Or why do you layer in intent?
So we actually just started layering in intent at Elation, and my ABM manager, Nicole Kimmick, calls it responsive ABM, which I thought sounded incredibly cool. But just because you have a list of target accounts and you know that they fit your ideal customer profile does not mean they're in market, right? I mean, it's a little bit like a no duh, right? And so now that we can layer in intent and see who's actually showing interest in our type of category, that is helping our SDRs and our AEs really understand where to put their effort and telling us where we should be for for example, running ads and that kind of stuff. And part of this question that Crystal asked is the flow for account-based marketing. I think what she might be referring to is, starting with your ICP, then figuring out your total addressable market. So, the universe of accounts that you could potentially go after. And from that, come up with your target account list. It's a great flow because it allows you to know where all the accounts potentially are, and then helps you, especially in planning. So you can imagine, hey, where should we open a new territory? Oh, look, there's a cluster of accounts in this particular geo. And so it can be very helpful that way.
All right, next is from Eric. You mentioned redoing research a few times. What have you seen change and what has stayed the same?
Yeah, this research has been done 3 times altogether. And what has stayed the same is attitudes and stereotypes, which is disappointing, frankly, right? Although there is one that I didn't show on the slides, which there's a question that I always ask each group, marketing and sales. Do you have friends in the other team? And do you think they have a hard job? And I call those the affinity scores. And the friendships are going up, and the respect in terms of, wow, his job is really hard, her job is really hard, that's going up. So that's great. I feel like that all starts with empathy, right? Other things that have changed, I think really for the better, is in the deck, you guys will see that I made 7 predictions when I wrote the book about what was going to happen in the future of alignment. And a lot of them, shockingly, are coming true, which is really cool. For example, the impact that millennials are having, the priority for account-based marketing, that's another one. And so I think we are evolving as a species, as sales and marketing species, and you can see it in the data.
Yeah, no, the predictions in the deck, there were some of the hidden slides were pretty cool to see. That's awesome.
They're 5 years old. I mean, that's what's crazy about it, right? It's
that is wild. I saw those. I'm like, after leading teams and building teams for the last decade or so, I'm like, yes.
Oh, and Pete, one of the predictions that I actually would want to share with the group here is that academia would start to catch up.
Yes.
And I don't know about all of you on the call, but when I studied at the University of Michigan, there was not a business marketing degree. You could get an MBA, you could get an undergrad BA, but the marketing classes were the 4 Ps and consumer based. We didn't learn anything about B2B, and there certainly was nothing for sales, absolutely nothing. And you're starting to see really good programs out of many universities now that are professional selling programs where they mentor with someone on the outside. And then there's organizations like FlockJ and SV Academy that are formally teaching, and Tenbound, of course, you guys are here, putting together best practices for SDRs. And that stuff did not exist before. So, I'm super happy to see that.
Yeah, in fact, it was I'm actually have a degree in marketing, believe it or not. But
that's awesome.
Yeah, capstone professor at Chico State, where I played baseball and went to school. I remember first question was who wants to get into marketing? And everyone, of course, raises their hands, right? And then at the end, right after that, he's like, almost every single one of you are going to be in sales. So it's kind of a interesting prediction there, but
that's awesome.
All right, last question for you, Tracy. What does variable comp look like for marketing from Jeremy?
Yeah, so let's talk about what I call classic marketing, right? These are demand gen people, CMOs, stuff like that. Typically, you've got your base salary, and then there's some portion of bonus that's paid out quarterly or annually based on some sort of goals. In my last company, there was as much as 25% more that I could earn in a calendar year if I hit or exceeded pipeline goals. And I, as CMO, was tied 100% to that particular thing. Sometimes there's more activity-based measures to pay out such a bonus. But, I think, executives are on the high side in terms of variable comp, but I really like being incented, with that variability. At my current company, we have an annual program that all of us are on, and that's based on company level goals that are revenue, revenue growth related, anti-churn related, things of that nature.
Awesome. Well, Tracy, so much good information. Thank you so much for putting together that deck. We will get the deck out to everybody. So thank you so much for taking the time today. Tracy Eiler, the CMO of Elation. Thank you again.
Thanks, everybody, and please stay in touch.
See you guys.